everyone. So after a very long delay, we finally have Black Widow for our viewing pleasure. This is Marvel's newest film that takes place in between Civil War and Avengers Infinity War, of course. And it is all about Natasha's journey throughout those two films and what she was up to and kind of her personal redemption arc in order for her to find her family and basically come to terms with her past in the Black Widow program. Of course, her past with the Red Room and shutting it down for good. We get appearances by, of course, Yelena, who is played by Florence Pugh, Red Guardian, which is played by Dave Harbour. Taskmaster makes her way into this film as well. There's definitely a bunch of intense, crazy Marvel moments that we've all been waiting for that make its way into this film. So without further ado, let me get into my review for Marvel's Black Widow. This film has a runtime of about 2 hours and 15 minutes. And like I said, it's mostly about Natasha being able to reconnect with her adoptive family. She lost her parents when she was very young, and Dave Harbour is a Red Guardian. His wife ended up adopting her, and of course another young girl who we know as Yelena, who's played by Florence Pugh. And it starts off with a pretty fun action sequence, being able to see Red Guardian in action, not in costume of course, but I did quite enjoy this scenario that they had in play because of course in order for Natasha to grow, we know that they have to escape the situation, but it's kind of tough watching the Red Guardian work for a force that's so bad, taking out SHIELD agents and of course going against an agency that at least at the time was trying to do good. But of course after this is all taken into account, everything comes together. Natasha and Yelena are put back into the Black Widow program, and they basically get hired to be assassins for Russian oligarch essentially in this film. And a lot of their free will is taken away from them, especially Yelena's character. Natasha was able to get out, and there's definitely a lot of remorse between her and Yelena because of that, and just wondering why the family never stayed together. There definitely is a lot of family strife that all four of them have to work through, and they definitely hash out at each other throughout the majority of this film. So that kind of creates a family dynamic, one that's a little tough to get into because they're never truly a family, and it's tough to see them care for each other because of just the really bad backstory that they've had and shared with each other, and how separate they were when they were all so young, and definitely to not a great relationship with their parents, especially Dave Harbour's Red Guardian, where he's not even really trying to redeem his past actions. He just wants to relive the glory days that he thinks was stolen away from him because his government essentially threw him into prison, and he was never able to be Russia's Captain America. He felt betrayed by his government, and he just wants the shots, and that's all that he ever wants, is the shot again to show the world how amazing he was and that he could totally take Captain America in a fight and things like that. But they all have to come together to take down the Red Room, kind of get redemption for how much their family was destroyed through the Black Widow program. And through all of this, we find out that all the Black Widow agents are being controlled through extreme conditioning that can only be undone by kind of this red mist. Yelena gets it, and it basically cures her of all her brainwashing that this program did to her. And there's a bunch of Black Widow agents after them throughout the entire film who are basically brainwashed, and they just want to be broken out of it. They have no consciousness of what really they're doing, what is really them, and what's being controlled, even though we find out the entire time they're just being controlled. And of course, Taskmaster makes her way into this film too, and she is basically sent to annihilate any threat to the Black Widow program. So for the majority of the film, she's going after Natasha. There are some really fun action sequences in this, but a lot of the time they're very unbelievable to the characters who are within them, where of course we've all seen it in the trailers, and like it was a really awesome fun scene to watch, but it's kind of tough to imagine Black Widow being able to fall like thousands and thousands of feet and duck through debris, land on falling debris, and have fights on it. A lot of the chase scenes too, and crash scenes, just again, a lot of it just is really unrealistic, and it's like almost, if it was Captain America doing these things, I would be able to understand it a little more because his body is meant to be able to take these things, but not so much with Black Widow, where Again, like, it is very stylistic and fun, but a lot of the times, like I said, it's just kind of unbelievable for her character. And I found too that a lot of times the directing, especially when it came to the fight scenes in this film, were really, really poorly shot and put together. There's some shaky cam, a lot of cuts, it drops, so you don't get to see a lot of the moves the stunt coordinators are doing, even though like their work looked absolutely incredible. Just the way it was filmed, you don't get to see a lot of it. And I found too, this movie suffered from a lot of pacing issues where it moved really fast paced to the points where it was kind of tough to create a story for this movie because it just rushes from point A to point B really, really quickly. And it drags out a lot of the dialogue sequences for just two characters hashing it out, not really adding anything to the growth of the characters, to the growth of the MCU. There's nothing at all that this movie adds to the larger MCU or Black Widow's character. And I found too, I was excited for this movie because they were saying it was going to kind of add justice to Black Widow's character that we didn't really get in Avengers Endgame. And I didn't find any of that at all in this, and it just kind of felt even too more like a bit more of like a punch in the guts for the after credit sequence in this movie too. It just wasn't anything that truly added to her character, made me like her more, anything like that. And I just was really disappointed by all of it. Especially too, like, the acting in this is really good. Like, I did really like Scarlett Johansson's performance in this movie, but she just didn't really have a lot to work with script wise. It's the exact same thing with Dave Harbour, where he was a perfect Red Guardian, but he didn't get enough screen time, especially not in terms of action, to really make us think, oh yeah, this guy's amazing. He deserves to have the recognition that he wanted in terms of being like a Captain America-like figure. We never really get that from him at all. Florence Pugh's character was great, and she was kind of like the one standout character in this movie who I thought had a lot of growth, and I am excited to see a little bit more of her in the future of the MCU. But then again, I'm trying not to go into spoiler territory. It gives us a little glimpse of how that is going to happen in the next part of the MCU through the after credits scene in this movie. But one of my biggest disappointments in this film is, of course, the villain, the head of the Red Room, who was just a really poorly written one-off villain who you're not even going to remember the name of this guy or really even remember most of this movie. It's just not very fleshed out or well done. His motivations are just rich asshole, and that's kind of all it was. I found even Hammer was a better villain than this guy was, and it was just really boring. And I was kind of hoping that it wouldn't go this way, but this is not Taskmaster either. Again, it's almost like what they did with Crimson Dynamo in Iron Man 2. This is kind of the equivalent of what Taskmaster is, and it just, again, felt like another gut punch to an amazingly written villain in the comics, to just being one-off and not even truly going into the trauma that being able to copy the abilities of one's fights would do to a person. It's more just robotic in this movie without going too spoilery. Again, like, I love Taskmaster, and this just was not that at all for me. Again, it was just something that really disappointed me with this movie. It just didn't go into the origins of the character at all or really explain the abilities. Of course, like, it's called the Taskmaster Initiative in the film, and it's just to the way that, like, you do get a bit of tragic backstory for the character, but not enough time with them to really reconcile with them and have all the feelings that the movie would want you to have for them. And again, it's just not the Taskmaster that I think anyone would have wanted for this film. And not really the Black Widow movie or the solo film that anyone would have wanted for her. I feel like they could have done this arc in so many better ways, or given her another arc that was more about her having to deal with this being on the run more from the Avengers after the events of Civil War. There could have just been a lot more that they could have and should have put in this movie to make it more entertaining and actually something that truly mattered to the MCU. Didn't even really feel like an origin film, neither a redemption film for Black Widow's character. And unfortunately, just with all this taken together, I really want this movie to grow on me, but I'm not certain it's going to. I'm going to give it another watch, but after watching it for the first time, I'm going to have to give it a 5 out of 10. Just was very disappointing, drawn out, way too fast paced with not really a story or action sequences that could hype it up and tell the story for it and like enlighten it in so many different ways. It was just really sluggish and unfortunately just really disappointing, and I feel like the character deserved so much more. But of course, if you've seen Black Widow, please let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. And if you like this review, you can check out all my other movie reviews and everything else that I do on my channel through my descriptions down below. And of course, I'll link some playlists up top here. Of course, if you like what you see on this channel, subscribe and turn the little ringer on if you want to know when I upload new videos. In the description, there is a link to my Twitch, which is where I do everything video game wise, and there's also a link to the Media Mountain, which is my Discord where we talk about comics, movies, video games, TV, basically everything that's awesome in this world, so you can join that amazing community and help make it even more amazing than it is. But yes, you can either go see Black Widow in theaters, or you can rent it for $35 Canadian on Disney Plus, and then you kind of have it forever. You can watch it however many times you'd like. But yes, you can check it out on Disney Plus in the theaters, and awesome, guys.